human ingenuity cannot concoct a cipher which human ingenuity cannot resolve. Greetings, Poe fans. Welcome back to our regularly scheduled Poecast. I am Carmen Bolden.
And I am Jeanie Smith, and
we are the Poetastic 2. And welcome back to February, the month of love.
Oh, yes, the wonderful world of love.
And there is another reason why Jeanie and I love February, because we were both born in February.
Yes, we were the love babies.
Yes.
Me more than you, but...
Yes, because she is a Valentine, true for
Valentine
all.
baby.
Yes.
I'm a true Valentine baby. You're the end of the month, so you're still in the month of love.
Yes, 23rd, which kind of talking about what we're going to talk about is kind of funny that my birthday is the 23rd, because there's been a movie about that. Mm-hmm. That could be a very symbolic number.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of thing. So it's kind of funny.
And that fits very well with what we're going to be talking about with the symbolism in the month of love, because we're going to be talking about the love of things that Poe has when it comes to symbols.
Exactly. Cryptology, cryptograms, ciphers, any of those kinds of logic puzzles. And he loved them for himself and loved them for the public. Right on to that, we're going to get right into this discussion. So, Jeanie.
Yes.
Tell me about cryptology and ciphers and, where did it begin?
Well, that in itself can be traced somewhat. They talk about numerology and numbers as far back as into the Bible.
Oh, wow.
And Revelations, the number of 666, and how there is written prophecy in the numbers, and they've tried to cipher them throughout the many generations. Mm-hmm. However, we all know that it's not something you can decipher.
Right.
Because you don't know where it started. But the most interesting is they trace it back, especially in military times.
Okay.
Go back to the ancient Greeks, when you have like Julius Caesar, and you have all those, because they have the Caesar cipher.
True.
That he would
Yes.
actually code messages to his military generals, and they would have to decipher them.
True.
And he would use kind of a just regular shift type cipher,
Okay.
or integrated into more of like the big letters would be, you'd read the first letter of each word.
Right.
And it would translate out to it. But the most interesting is you have the ancient Chinese.
Okay.
Those types of civilizations. They haven't really been able to trace it, but they say that the Chinese would send in coded messages to combat against the Han, Genghis Khan, all those wonderful things. So military does have a major base for these types of ciphers and these cryptologists.
That makes perfect sense. And I was going to say, even you mentioned the Egyptians with hieroglyphics and things like that.
Oh, absolutely.
And even like the Sumerian language and things like that.
Yes, which also goes back to the Sumerians were the first ones that actually kind of used written knowledge, because they were the first ones that had written language on the clay tablets.
Right.
And like with anything, as humans, we were talking about this earlier, we already have this predisposition of loving things that make us wonder.
Yes.
And, triggers our imagination and trying to hide things from other people. I mean, think about it. When we were kids, we would always create our own type of language. So our parents, when they found our stuff, they wouldn't be able to read it.
Yes.
In diaries that we would write, we would make up different names or different things, and you'd have to hand it off to your friends, or passing notes in class. Being a teacher, we always hated that. But you do it.
Yes.
So, and this all goes back into the history. We always had ways, but, military is I hate to say, the best one of the usage of cryptology and ciphers.
Absolutely, especially World War II, which is, a lot further along than, what you were first discussing. But yeah.
Yeah, and that goes along with the invention of technology. Technologies have differed and changed so much. The hieroglyphics you were talking about with Egypt.
Right.
It took forever for them to decipher just the hieroglyphics, because the hieroglyphics themselves were a type of language that was hidden. And then with the discovery of the Rosetta Stone.
Right. And I think when part of my research, I found, it was discovered in 1799, but not fully decoded until the 1820s.
Right.
So
it took a while.
Yeah. And it's a good thing they were able to decode it as quickly as they did, thinking about some things that haven't been decoded ever.
Yeah. And I think that I've read somewhere that they're still working and still deciphering some of it and breaking some of the codes of other things.
Okay.
Because you have to think about it. In those days, hiding things from other people, especially with different languages, is pretty easy.
Right.
Because not everybody knew everybody else's languages.
Exactly. And distrust among different people and survival of the fittest, you can kind of tie all that type of thing in.
Oh, yeah. And even back in the history of the Masons, the Freemasons and all that, they had their own type of cryptology and ciphers that they would use to hide information. And the best movie that I've ever used, and I used this movie when I taught American history, was National Treasure.
Okay, yes.
Because, he had to use all these different types of ciphers
Right.
and cryptologies. And, the glasses of Ben Franklin, which they brought in a lot of different things of how the different technology to decipher the codes and the puzzles. And we love puzzles.
Yes, absolutely.
And so history starts, way back, and then good old literature didn't come into play until of Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes, exactly. In December of 1839, when Poe was living in Philadelphia and working for Alexander's Weekly Messenger, he had readers send him substitution cryptograms because he could solve them. And he pretty much solved all of them, which was really neat and very proud of it.
Yeah, because that's like anything. Even to today's society, we love to, I don't know, since we're not big on newspapers anymore, everything else is electronics.
Right.
But the New York Times, the crosswords, and all those, because we are a people that love to solve puzzles and riddles and trivia.
Yes, and we're going to get into more of that in the second part of this episode, because we have a special guest that we're not going to talk about yet.
Exactly. We're going to wait till closer to the end of our little intro here.
Exactly.
To give you a 411 on him.
Absolutely. And kind of going back to Poe, in 1841, he wrote a piece called A Few Words on Secret Writing.
Yes.
And published that in one of his publications that he was doing, and talking about just, ciphers and things like that. Then he published 2 cryptograms for readers to solve, and they were submitted by someone named W. Tyler. And Poe said of this man, a gentleman whose abilities are highly respected.
Nice.
And so there is some myth out there around this, that was this Poe disguised as this Tyler man, or was there actually a person that he, had this submitted or whatever.
Yeah, I had sent it to him in the newspaper and he just published it. So you never know. That's the one thing with history. There's still a lot of open information.
Exactly.
That we can interpret and we can puzzle.
Yes.
Who did it and everything. But
much pun intended.
Exactly, very much so. But the thing about it is he also made a big show in Dupine's works while he used some of that cryptograms and the puzzles and everything, trying to figure them out. And it is just something that
ratiocination.
Yeah.
Yes.
It plays to our intellect.
Oh, it does. And
Tickles our fancy, as the old saying
it does. It does. It's like that, lizard brain kind of thinking.
It's like, ooh, I know this.
And in 1843, in his short story, The Gold Bug, he also actually has a cryptogram in there, a cipher, and it's using a golden scarab, and there's an encoded parchment to be able for the characters to find the pirate treasure. And we're not going to give any spoilers, but it is an excellent, excellent story. It's a mystery. It's full of really good stuff.
Yeah, and several of his poetries, or poems, my bad. His poems in his poetry, he uses some types of ciphers in there by using a shift cipher or using the capitalization and using those types of...
Right. There's one that is a definite, they know for sure, like, people that have really like gone into studying the specifics and finding anything. But he used steganography in a poem he wrote to Sarah Anna Lewis. I couldn't read my writing in my notes.
Yeah, I have that.
And steganography is when you hide things in plain sight. And so what he did is he added her name within the poem on each line. So the first line contained her first initial of her name. Second line was the second letter of her name, and so on and so forth. And so if you weren't really paying attention, you would miss it. But if you really were digging in, trying to find some kind of, cipher, symbolism, anything like that, it's there. And
yeah. And being an English teachers that we are,
yes,
we use a type of this in literature to teach how to associate like words with names and stuff like that. It's like where you take your name and then the first of your initial, you put something to describe yourself. Like J would be...
Oh, like an acrostic?
Thank you.
Yes.
I knew it started with an A.
Yes.
I kept thinking anagram, and I'm like, no, it's not an anagram. Yeah, an acrostic poem.
Yes.
That we use to teach in the literature and everything to help, the association. And so that would be, we could trace that back to Edgar Allan Poe when he was using type of this. It could be a type of acrostic type poem.
Absolutely.
Where instead of starting with the letter, he was embedding the letter into the actual verse.
Right, exactly. One of the things that I wanted to also add in is just finding Poe's actual challenge from Alexander's Weekly Messenger, where he wrote, I'm going to quote this, it would be by no means a labor lost to show how great a degree of rigid method enters into enigma guessing. This may sound oddly, but it is not more strange than the well-known fact that rules really exist, by means of which it is easy to decipher any species of hieroglyphical writing. That is to say, writing where, in place of alphabetical letters, any kind of marks are made use of at random. For example, in place of a % or any other arbitrary character, in place of B, a asterisk, etc., etc. Let an entire alphabet be made in this manner, and then let this alphabet be used in any piece of writing. This writing can be read by means of a proper method. Let this be put to the test. Let anyone address us a letter in this way, and we pledge ourselves to read it forthwith, however unusual or arbitrary may be the characters employed. So I thought this was really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
How he wrote that out.
Yeah, and how he used the term enigma.
Yes.
Because that's the one thing that World War II came about was the actual computer, the enigma.
Yes.
That broke the codes of World War II and helped, in that aspect. And then led into some of the technology that we have today.
Exactly. And what's really interesting, also kind of going back to the 2 cryptograms that Poe actually asked society to solve.
Right.
Guess how long it was before these were solved?
Ooh, I'm going to say quite a long time.
Yes. So the first one, 1992.
Whoa.
And the second one in the year 2000.
Good Lord.
I know.
I mean, that had to be a hefty poem or puzzle to decipher over 100 years.
Yes.
I mean, 150 for the first one, and then almost
It was 8 years later after the first one was solved.
So
but
almost
the second
170 for the second one.
Yeah. And so you wonder, I mean, if that really was Poe in disguise, you know, how proud would he be? And for this random man named Tyler, you know, the same for him as well.
Yeah. And okay, this is going to sound really, you know, probably morbid coming from me, but hey, this is me.
Oh, please.
If you don't know me by now, you're going to know that I love morbidity.
Oh, I think they already know this, Jeanie.
Yes. I mean, think about the Zodiac Killer.
Yes.
The Zodiac Killer used the ciphers and sent them into the newspapers. I mean, yes, we're going back to Edgar Allan Poe, and I'm giving a bit of a spoiler to something here, like called The Pale Blue Eye, if you haven't seen it. But I'm not going to say anything more than that.
Right.
But if you think about the Zodiac Killer, and I believe, and I can't be positive of this because, you know, things come and go quickly in the news world, but it's found that there's someone who actually broke the final code of the Zodiac Killer and, you know, deciphered his final message.
Okay.
So I think they may have figured out who it was.
Right.
However, they're keeping that close to the vest. And you know how that I understand that some of those things, especially when it's criminal pursuits, you have to keep some of that stuff out of the mainstream media.
Yes, exactly.
But that Zodiac Killer was not the only one that has used those types of puzzles over the years to encrypt a lot of information. And so you think about it, you want to hide information, the best way to do it is to encrypt it in some way. I mean, we do it all the time on our technology with passwords.
Absolutely.
We're trying to encrypt our own technology. It's easily broken in some ways if you get the right algorithm because that's technology.
And some computers can't even break some ciphers.
Yeah, because now we've got these AI bots. And these AI bots are like, this is like child's play.
Right, exactly.
I'll just crush the box and just let it go.
Yeah.
But it just seems that it's not going away. It's something that has built and built and built and built and built, and it's just keep going. Right.
And our instinct nature is to figure things out, you know, just that constant, you know, asking questions and things like that. And, you know, a lot of Poe scholars, you know, wonder, are there more ciphers within his works? Eureka, his work on science. Some people think that there is some, you know, encoding in there. It'd be really interesting to study some of his works more in depth, looking for those types of clues and you know, and cryptic messages.
And absolutely, if you even push back farther into the ancient Greek times, because our mathematics and our algebraic goes to the Egyptians and the Arabics and all that. If they hadn't questioned the coding of just simple world science, then we wouldn't have half the stuff we have now.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the atom. If it hadn't been for the ancient Greeks who decided to, hey, an atom is an indivisible particle.
Right.
That's what atom means in Greek. And that's what built into our scientific basis of chemistry today.
Absolutely. It's phenomenal to think about all these things.
And the world itself is a giant cryptogram.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And we're always trying to break that code and figure it out.
And I mean, just think about it. If, you know, you think about the theory of Pangea, we're now a puzzle piece.
Oh, yes.
If you think about it like that. But anyway.
And we're continuing to break and move.
Yes.
Because that's the whole world of volcanoes and earthquakes and fault lines and everything, and figuring out that puzzle of when it's going to happen, what's going to do. And you know, the Earth is a giant cipher that we can't decipher.
Exactly. All right, we're getting too deep, Jeanie. That's okay. It's all right.
It's just life.
But, you know, with ciphers and cryptograms and puzzles and things like that, just, you know, you mentioned crosswords earlier. They kind of really started around the time, you know, that Poe lived. And then in 1903, someone that really loved Poe was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Of course.
When he wrote The Adventure of the Dancing Men, he actually added secret messages into that. And he kind of used something similar to what Poe used in the Gold Bug.
Yeah, that's a different story. I've never read.
Yeah.
Gold Bug.
And then about 10 years later, 1913-ish, around there, Doyle wrote The Valley of Fear, and he used a book cipher. And what that means is that the sender and receiver have the same book. Specifically, it's better if they have the exact same copy edition, to where they can send secret messages back and forth to each other. So he used that type of cipher in that particular work.
Yeah, and that's one of the most popular ones that has been used in literature throughout time ever since. I mean, you go back into the Hardy Boys, the Nancy Drew series, and even past that and into more of a comic world.
Right.
You have the book ciphers being the most popular because it's more of an intellect basis, because your criminals were more intellectual, because with Sherlock and what's his name, bad guy in Sherlock.
Oh, Moriarty.
Yeah, Moriarty. I knew it started with M. Couldn't think of. I was like, not Murdoch. That's A-Team.
Yeah,
Moriarty, because they were intellectuals.
Yes,
and it was all about that academia
and the challenge
of being smarter, and the chess of it all. Finding the right letters on the right pages. And so, yeah, I mean, that's one of the more basics in literature that we've used and see in the writing is the book ciphers.
Absolutely. And then to kind of keep talking about, ciphers in books, 66 years after the last Holmes story, Ken Follett used a cipher in the book The Key to Rebecca, which the actual cipher, the answer was found in Du Maurier's Rebecca. And I just think that's really interesting, because that even also kind of falls into, that side note of Hitchcock. And so just kind of interesting to think about that. But some other works that used some type of cryptic messages, ciphers of those, The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, The Da Vinci Code with Dan Brown, which was a craze. I mean, just, phenomenal craze. Cryptomonicum by Neil Stevenson, Enigma by Robert Harris, The 11th Hour by Graham Bowes. I'm sorry. I really need to do better on my handwriting. The Rule of Four by Ian Caldwell and Dustin Thomason. So all of those in books, those all contain different types of ciphers.
And that's a very small population.
Yes. I mean, and I'm sure there's others, but just in doing research, those were some of the ones that we found. And then, of course, movies that have used ciphers, and again, these are just a few to hit upon. You've already mentioned National Treasure, The Imitation Game, the actual movie Zodiac, which is a really good film, Contact, and also Sneakers.
Oh, yes. I loved Sneakers back in the day.
That was a good one.
I don't think it, unless it's kind of our generation, I don't know if this, last 20 or maybe even 30 years of generation has actually seen Sneakers, but I really enjoyed it because it was at that time period and those movies that were centered around those technological aspects, because you had the war games, you had Sneakers, you had all that coming into play.
Right.
So, yeah. Puzzles, crosswords. I mean,
and we didn't even hit upon TV shows that have that type of puzzles and ciphers and things. And
we can just say any of the forensics that have any forensic television.
Yes,
all those in themselves.
And I never did watch Numbers, but I'm assuming that
it was awesome. You talk about the things that he would bring up about the numbers and how they tied into everything, and you're going, I never thought of that. Wow.
Exactly.
It was just amazing. But yeah, we could jump down that rabbit hole for another good long time there. But for right now, we're going to switch over and give you a little info into our special guest that we're going to have on this episode. And I'm going to let Carmen take it away because she actually has the book in front of her.
Yes. And the book is The Puzzler, and the author is A.J. Jacobs. And I'm going to read just the very front of it. One man's quest to solve the most baffling puzzles ever, from crosswords to jigsaws to the meaning of life. And so AJ is about to join us, and we are going to dig into his mind about puzzles and just more about all of the things that Poe loved, but also that just human beings love, and just solving the mystery of the unknown.
Yeah, and see what his love of his work crosses over with our love for our work of Poe.
Absolutely.
So please stay tuned, and we're going to welcome you to our wonderful world and AJ Jacobs.
Yes.